The rain hadn't stopped in 3 days. It tapped relentlessly on the cracked window of the tiny apartment like a reminder that the world outside didn't care what happened within. Inside, a woman sat on the edge of a worn-out sofa, staring blankly at the flickering light bulb overhead. Her name was Clara, and every flicker seemed to match the rhythm of her fading hope. Across the room, her little girl, Lily, 7 years old, sat cross-legged on the cold floor, hugging her faded teddy bear. The sound of her mother's sighs filled the silence more than the rain ever could. "Mommy," Lily's small voice broke through the stillness. "Do you think God forgot us?" Clara froze. The question pierced her like a knife. She swallowed hard, blinking away tears. She didn't want her daughter to see her cry again, not tonight. Not after another day of rejection and unpaid bills. She turned her face toward the window, pretending to look at the rain. "Of course not, sweetheart," she said softly, forcing a smile. "God never forgets anyone." But the tremor in her voice betrayed the truth. She wasn't sure she believed that anymore. Clara had been holding things together ever since her husband left 2 years ago. He had walked out one morning after promising he'd figure things out, and he never came back. No calls, no letters, not even a goodbye to Lily. The first few months were a blur of anger and confusion, but eventually, reality sank in. She was on her own. Bills piled up. Her job at the diner barely covered rent. Then the diner shut down, and her world began to collapse. By the time she found a new job cleaning offices at night, she was already months behind on everything: rent, utilities, groceries. The landlord's warnings had turned into threats, and now, the eviction notice sat like a scarlet letter taped to the door. That night, Clara held her daughter close. "Sleep, baby," she whispered, though her own eyes refused to close. "Tomorrow will be better." But she didn't know how. The next morning, Clara gathered what little courage she had left and took Lily with her. The rain had turned into a cold mist that clung to everything. They stopped by the corner store to buy bread and milk with the few coins she had left. As she reached for the milk, her hand froze. The price tag was higher than she remembered. She didn't have enough for both. She stood there, torn, when Lily tugged her sleeve. "Mommy, I can drink water." "You should eat." The words broke her heart. She quickly grabbed a smaller loaf and handed the coins to the cashier, trying not to meet his eyes. She could feel the pity, the judgment. It burned more than hunger. When they stepped outside, the cold bit through her thin jacket. She wrapped her arm around Lily. "We'll be okay," she said. "We always are." But as they walked down the street, Clara didn't notice the man standing under the bus shelter watching them, the same man who'd been quietly observing her for weeks. His name was Daniel. He was a single father too. Daniel had lost his wife to cancer 3 years ago, and ever since, he'd been raising his son, Ethan, alone. He worked as a mechanic in a small garage nearby, and though money was tight, he made sure his boy never went to bed hungry or hopeless. Every morning on his way to work, he passed by the same cafe where Clara used to work. He remembered her kind smile, the way she always slipped an extra sugar packet into his coffee for free, saying, "You look like you could use a sweeter day." But one morning, she wasn't there. A different face behind the counter, a different laugh. When he asked, they told him she'd quit, or maybe been let go. He didn't know which. Then, 1 week later, he saw her again, this time sitting on a bench with her daughter, shivering under an umbrella too small to cover them both. Something inside him stirred. He didn't know her story, but he saw the exhaustion in her eyes. He saw it because he'd worn the same look once. The next day, as Daniel walked home from work, he saw Clara struggling to carry 2 heavy grocery bags while holding Lily's hand. Without thinking, he crossed the street. "Hey," he said gently. "Need a hand?" Clara hesitated, startled. "Oh, no, I'm fine, thank you." But she wasn't. One of the bags slipped from her hand, spilling apples onto the sidewalk. Daniel crouched down to help her gather them, and for the first time, she met his eyes. They were kind. Steady. The kind of eyes that didn't pity, they understood. "I'm Daniel," he said, smiling softly. "You work around here?" "I used to," she murmured. "Just trying to get by now." He nodded. "I get that." Then, after a pause, he asked, "Can I help you carry these home?" She wanted to say no, pride told her to, but something in his tone made her feel safe. So she nodded. "Thank you." As they walked, Lily skipped ahead, humming softly. Daniel glanced at her, then back at Clara. "She's got your smile," he said. Clara looked down, a faint blush touching her cheeks. "She's the reason I keep trying." He understood that better than anyone. When they reached the worn-down apartment building, Daniel noticed the eviction notice still taped to her door. Clara tried to cover it with her hand, embarrassed. I'm figuring things out," she said quickly. Daniel didn't pry. "If you need anything," he said softly, "I live a few blocks down. My son and I, well, we're used to helping where we can." She thanked him, though she didn't really believe she'd see him again. But she did. The next morning, there was a knock on the door. Clara opened it to find a bag of groceries and a note. "For you and Lily. From a friend who hasn't forgotten." There was no name, but she knew who it was. Tears welled up in her eyes as she lifted the bag inside. Apples, milk, bread, more than she could have ever afforded that week. She pressed the note to her heart. Lily peeked into the bag, her eyes lighting up. "Mommy. Look. Milk." Clara smiled through her tears. "See, sweetheart? God didn't forget us after all." Over the next few weeks, Daniel became a quiet part of their lives. Sometimes he'd stop by with food, other times just to check on them. He'd bring Ethan, and soon Lily had a new friend. The laughter of children filled the apartment where silence once reigned. For the first time in months, Clara felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, hope. But the problems didn't disappear overnight. One evening, Clara came home to find the landlord waiting. "Rent's overdue again, Clara." "I'm sorry, but I can't keep waiting." Her stomach dropped. "Please, just a little more time." He shook his head. "You've had months. You need to be out by Friday." That night, Clara sat on the floor, crying silently as Lily slept beside her. The thought of the streets terrified her. She whispered, "God, please. I don't know what else to do." The next morning, Daniel came by and immediately saw the worry in her eyes. "What happened?" She hesitated, then told him everything. He listened quietly, his jaw tightening. Then, without saying a word, he stood up. "Pack your things." "What?" "Daniel, no, I can't let you." "You can," he said firmly. "And you will. You and Lily can stay with us. Just until you get back on your feet." She shook her head, tears falling. "I don't want to be a burden." He looked at her, his voice gentle. "You're not. You're a mother doing everything she can for her child. That's never a burden." Within an hour, Clara and Lily were at Daniel's small but warm home. Ethan ran to greet them, and Lily's face lit up. "Mommy, look. They have a dog." Daniel smiled. "That's Max. He likes everyone, especially people who need hugs." As the children played, Clara stood by the door, overwhelmed. "Daniel, I don't know how to thank you." He shook his head. "Don't. Just promise me one thing, don't give up." Days turned into weeks, and the small house began to feel like home. Clara helped around the house, cooked dinner, and even found part-time work at a nearby bakery. Every evening, they'd all sit together, Daniel, Clara, Ethan, and Lily, sharing stories and laughter over simple meals. It wasn't perfect, but it was peaceful. And peace was something they all desperately needed. One evening, after the kids went to bed, Clara sat quietly on the porch. Daniel joined her, 2 cups of coffee in hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything. You didn't have to help us." He looked at her for a moment.